Frankism. Frankism was a Sabbatean religious movement originating in Rabbinic Judaism of the 18th and 19th centuries, created in Podolia. It was named after its founder, Jacob Frank. Frank completely rejected Jewish norms, preaching to his followers that they were obligated to transgress moral boundaries, embracing antinomianism. The Frankists engaged in sexually promiscuous rites, such as the infamous 1756 incident in Landskrona, where they were allegedly caught dancing around a half-naked woman, symbolizing the Shekinah. At its height, Frankism claimed perhaps 50,000 followers, primarily Jews living in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, as well as in other regions of Central and Eastern Europe. Later, Frankists were encouraged to convert en masse to Catholicism. Description: Frankists believed in 𝗧𝗿𝗶𝗁𝗶𝗴𝗲, one of the most famous of all self-proclaimed messiahs in Jewish history. He believed in transgressing Jewish commandments to elevate the divine sparks constrained by them. He performed actions that violated traditional Jewish prohibitions, such as eating foods forbidden by kashrut, the Jewish dietary laws, and celebrating prescribed fast days as feast days. He eventually opted to convert to Islam rather than face execution for claiming to be the Messiah in Judaism. After 𝗧𝗿's death, several branches of Sabbateanism evolved that disagreed over which aspects of Judaism should be preserved and discarded. Jacob Frank claimed to be a reincarnation of 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗍𝗍 and followed and extended his practice of transgression. Father-daughter incest was commonly practiced by his followers, and orgies featured prominently in ritual. Frank claimed that all laws and teachings will fall, and following antinomianism, asserted that the most important obligation of humanity was the transgression of every boundary. Organization. Jacob Frank stood at the head of Frankism. He regarded his followers as soldiers, and all were members of a company to build an army to secure Frank's rule over a Frankist country. There were 4 company locations, in 𝗲𝗿, Częstochowa, Brno, and Offenbach am Main. Members were required to wear plate armor, shields, and helmets and train hard. His teachings were not intended for the ears of all Frankists, but only for his personally selected, small circle of so-called brothers and sisters, of whom he demanded blind obedience. Frank tried to maintain absolute control, or at least this circle, taking advantage of their tendency to believe in shadim and magic. Within the circle of brothers and sisters, Frank spoke directly only to the brothers. According to his teachings, nothing could be done with women alone, since women had brought death into the world. Doctrine. Words of the Lord. The most important Frankist text is the 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗍𝗏, Book of the Words of the Lord. This is written in Polish in elementary, almost folk language, and consists of short sayings, some fewer than 10 words, interpretations and parables, visions and dreams, longer speculations about the elements of the doctrine. Various episodes from Frank's life, the Frankist company, and contemporary rulers, and fairy tale stories up to 1100 words long to support them. There are mainly quotations from the Torah and the Zohar, as well as popular stories from the surrounding culture, which were quoted verbatim or paraphrased or adapted to his own doctrine. The text begins and ends with a vision. One is Frank's vision of his calling. 2192 is Frank's final testament to his company. The words of the Lord belongs to Jewish literature, but its contents reject Jewish tradition and teachings. Biblical figures such as Jacob, Esau and Esther are the foundations of Frank's teaching. Frank's brothers compiled the work between 1755 and 1791 as 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗍 collection of materials developed in numerous meetings. The original Polish title 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗍 book is therefore somewhat misleading, and is only used once in the collection, in 2192. It was written down starting around 1773 and distributed exclusively in the handwritten form to his widely scattered followers. The last known complete manuscript Words of the Lord 1-2192, was destroyed, along with numerous other Frankist sources, during the destruction of Warsaw in World War II. Until recently, all researchers of Frankism have relied on the source material of the extensive biography by the historian Alexander Kraushaar, the most important study of Frankism from the pre-war period, the V Doctrine. In Frankism, Frank is the third messianic incarnation of 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗏 after Sabbatean's avian Baruchia Russo, 1677–1720, and also the reborn Father Jacob. Nonetheless, he is only a helper. The actual guide in Frankism is the Virgin, the incarnation of the Shekinah and the female Messiah. Frankists are supposed to follow her bravely, like soldiers, through all horrors. The path by which Frank sought to lead his followers to life was symbolized by the letter V, which also represents Jacob's ladder. The seeker must first climb into the abyss to reach the deepest level of humiliation, and then climb back up to life. According to Frankist doctrine, the patriarchs and Moses had already tried to follow the path, but had failed, as had 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗱𝗏. Frank proclaims that the Frankists' descent down the V ladder into the deepest humiliation is reflected in society's hatred and exclusion of them, which result from Frankism's consistent implementation of the idea that all laws and teachings of the world are only laws of the three evil world rulers, the Pope, the Tsar, and the Sultan, and therefore do not need to be observed. In the best case, such laws and teachings need only be kept in pretense. Religions and teachings of the world can be worn like an empty shell, and then discarded at whim, because the true Torah is yet to be revealed. The Mosaic law with its 10 commandments should be despised, as it is part of the old Torah. The contempt for all teaching of the world culminates in a statement by Frank to his close circle of brothers and sisters that amounts to a command for total assimilation. One should adapt to the respective religion or language depending on the country. Frank also advises mass assimilation in the following passage. Solomon was wise, wiser than all the peoples. He mixed with the nations, took the daughters of kings as his wives, but he did not get anything out of it. He could mix with the nations, because he was a king. But here the whole world knows that I am descendant from Jews, that I am newly baptized and poor. But I have hope that I will mix with their society this winter, and they themselves will call me. I can tell you, whoever does not mix with the nations, all his work is in vain. Frank was not interested in the acculturation of the Jews. Rather, he wanted them to integrate into society in order to ultimately overthrow it. If the enemies of the Jews in the 18th century had been familiar with Frank's secret sectarian canon, it would have made the already hotly contested Jewish emancipation considerably more difficult. The Virgin, the center of Frankism, was a new concept of the Shekinah. However, the term was forbidden in Frankism because Jacob Frank referred to her as the Virgin. The Shekinah is a Kabbalistic term. Klaus Samuel Davidovich, a Jewish studies scholar at the University of Vienna, who has written extensively on Frank and Frankism, assumes it was initially an old name for God that referred to the indwelling or presence of God in a specific place. According to Frank's teachings, all of the important forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses, strove towards the Virgin, who manifested herself in different persons, such as Rachel, and all had failed. Moses' liberation from Egypt could not have been complete either, since the foundation of salvation is the Virgin. But now, according to Frank, the real Virgin had arrived, a female Messiah visible to all people, his daughter Eve Frank. In a teaching, Frank identifies himself with the traditional Messiah Ben Joseph, who will have a significant impact but perish in the fight against the enemies of the end times. Just as he precedes the Messiah Ben David, Frank prepares the way for the Virgin, his daughter. Frankism characterizes the Virgin using elements of the Esther stories, and is strongly influenced by the veneration of Mary in the Catholic Church, surrounding the Black Madonna of 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗏𝗏. He claimed that the Black Madonna would lead his followers to the Frankist Virgin and therefore presented baptism as a necessary step. Following the 𝗲𝗁𝗱𝗏 and the 𝗧𝗿𝗆𝗲𝗏, in which the Shekinah is described as being like a princess in a tower, Frank refers to an actual tower of the Jasna Gora monastery where he was exiled. He had miniature portraits of his daughter Eve made corresponding to Catholic images of Mary, mother of Jesus. These are now in the National Library of Israel. However, Eve, as Shekinah, was an element that had not yet appeared during Frank's lifetime. The Virgin was hidden from Frank, and his task was to free her. The Black Madonna points to the true Virgin, who will be revealed preceding the final redemption. Frank regarded himself as the Virgin's guide, who, before her manifestation, is in a mysterious place, and was given only to him since the beginning of the world, so that he, as her father, would be her guardian. The soul of the Shekinah was still with Frank. His brothers were unworthy to see her themselves. They were supposed to support Frank in finding the Virgin. Depending on the company's behavior, the Virgin would behave positively or negatively towards them, a well-known idea from the Kabbalistic descriptions of the Shekinah. During her father's lifetime, Eve Frank held a special position within the company. As soon as she was old enough, she stood at her father's side as a confidant and adjutant. Frank repeatedly accused his followers of having fallen back into Judaism, thus preventing the liberation of the Virgin. The only way to the Virgin is to adapt to the Polish environment. The liberation of the Shekinah, the transfer of the Shekinah's soul from Jacob to Eve Frank, is also described in some longer fairy tale-like narratives in the Words of the Lord, which are reminiscent of Middle Eastern models in the 1001 Nights. They use traditional Kabbalistic terminology, with the motif of concealment and disguise, as a gardener being important in Frankism. The garden stands for a symbolic setting of the world of the 10 Sephirot. The strengthening of the third Sephirah, 𝗍𝗏𝗏, the male principle, also known as the upper Shekinah, also leads to the liberation of the lower Shekinah. In Frank's perception of the Virgin, it is clear how deeply his ideas are rooted in Kabbalah and other Jewish writings. Despite Christian influences, the authors of the Words of the Lord, who created such colorful parables and allegories, required an excellent knowledge of Kabbalistic literature. The mystical goal. The last stage of the mystical path in Frankism is cosmic cognizance. In the 𝗧𝗿𝗆𝗏 as well as in Frankism, describes the mystical place where all 10 Sephirot were united. It is an apparent sephira, which cosmologically means the concealed knowledge that creates a harmonizing union between 2 Sephirot, the male principle of 𝗍𝗏𝗏 and the female principle of 𝗍𝗏. It results from the fusion of these cosmic forces. On a physical level, knowledge means the sexual union of man and woman, which manifests itself in the union of Adam and Eve in Genesis 4:1. It is thus possible to reach through sexual intercourse. With the help of sexual rites, Jacob Frank wished to reach on earth, the last step of Jacob's ladder. This knowledge was a higher realization that would bring a deep insight into everything. It was enlightenment and a fresh realization in one. With it would be associated a new name and a new soul. Frank emphasized that all the patriarchs, including 𝗧𝗿𝗶𝗁𝗱𝗏𝗍, had been unable to enter because they had not been baptized. To be worthy of entering the one must first reach the level of 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗶𝗁𝗆, the acceptance of Catholicism. Frankism allowed all of its followers to take part in the mystical search for but demanded blind obedience to its leader, combined with the complete abandonment of all laws and teachings, which, in any case, they only appeared to follow, true to the motto, "The more blind and radical my obedience to my Lord, the more likely the possibility of reaching After accepting Catholicism, the Frankists strove to complete the personal path to which in the end would only be possible for a few select brothers and sisters. The triangle or V of the ladder refers to the Trinity, but at the same time to the earthly path of the Frankists. By getting rid of all laws and teachings, they degraded themselves and incurred the contempt of society. The 𝗲 is applied to Edom, Shekinah, and dot, meaning the Frankists should be baptized to reach the cosmic 𝗍𝗲, or, at the tip of the V, the Virgin, who will raise them from the depths of their exile, leading them back up to dot. The beginning of the entry into dot will be seen on earth when the Frankists are integrated into non-Jewish society and accepted by the international community. Then, the mystical cosmological path will continue. Scholarly analysis. Several authorities on Sabbateanism, such as Heinrich Graetz and Alexander Kraushaar, were skeptical of the existence of a distinctive Frankist doctrine. According to 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗶𝗁𝗲𝗋, a 20th century authority on Sabbateanism and Kabbalah, Kraushaar described Frank's sayings as grotesque, comical, and incomprehensible. In his classic essay Redemption Through Sin, Scholem placed Frankism as a later and more radical outgrowth of Sabbateanism. In contrast, J. Michelson argues that Frankism was an original theology that was innovative, if sinister that was, in many respects, a departure from the earlier formulations of Sabbateanism. In traditional Sabbatean doctrine, 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝘁𝗶, and often his followers, claimed to be able to liberate the sparks of holiness hidden within what seemed to be evil. According to Michelson, Frank's theology asserted that the attempt to liberate the sparks of holiness was the problem, not the solution. Instead, Frank claimed that the mixing between holy and unholy was virtuous. Nathanael Lederberg claims that Frank had a Gnostic philosophy, wherein there was a true God, whose existence was hidden by a demiurge. This true God could allegedly be revealed only through the destruction of the social and religious structures created by the demiurge, thus leading to a thorough antinomianism. For Frank, the distinction between good and evil is a product of a world governed by the false God. Lederberg compares Frank's position to that of Friedrich Nietzsche. After Jacob Frank died in 1791, his daughter Eve, who had been declared in 1770 to be the Virgin, continued to lead the movement with her brothers. Modern-day references to Frankism, anti-Semitic tropes regarding Frankism, have persisted to the present day in some parts of the United States and other Western nations. Far-right activist Candace Owens associates it with devil worship and referred to it as the preferred religion of the elites.